The Marrakesh Murders unveiling Hajj Mohammed Mesfewi. Nestled within the vibrant chaos of Marrakesh, a tale of unspeakable horror unfolded at the dawn of the 20th century. Hajj Mohammed Mesfewi, a seemingly innocuous shoemaker and trader, emerged as one of Morocco's most notorious serial killers. Known infamously as the Marrakesh Arch-Killer, Mesfewi's gruesome spree claimed the lives of at least 36 young women, leaving a scar on the historic city that still lingers to this day. This documentary delves deep into the life and crimes of Mesfewi, exploring not only the atrocities but also the cultural and historical context of Marrakesh that allowed such darkness to thrive. Born in the latter half of the 19th century in Morocco, Hajj Mohammed Mesfewi was a respected figure in his community, known for his craftsmanship in shoemaking and his side business as a trader and public letter writer. In an era when literacy was not universal, Mesfewi's ability to write letters for illiterate clients made him an invaluable member of Marrakesh society. His shop, located in the narrow, winding streets of the ancient Medina, was a common gathering place, frequented by locals and travelers alike. In the early 1900s, Marrakesh was the center of trading activity and, unfortunately, a hotbed for various crimes. The constant flow of locals and foreigners in and out of the city made it challenging for authorities to follow and keep track of the increasing number of criminal activities. This environment of transient populations and limited law enforcement oversight would prove ideal for a predator like Mesfewi to operate undetected. The year 1906 was a pivotal moment in Moroccan history. The country was experiencing significant political and social upheaval under the rule of Sultan Abdelaziz, who had ascended to the throne in 1894 at the age of just 16. European powers were increasingly exerting their influence over the weakening sultanate, culminating in the Treaty of Algeciras in April 1906, which placed Morocco under the surveillance of the great powers. Sultan Abdelaziz's reign was marked by financial instability and mounting debt to European creditors. His extravagant spending habits, including a railroad inside the Meknes Palace, automobiles, and solid gold cameras, widened Morocco's trade deficit and substantiated accusations that he had become a puppet of European interests. From 1896 to 1906, the Moroccan real depreciated by 25%. And the country's trade deficit increased by 14 million francs annually between 1902 and 1919. This period of political weakness and social upheaval created an environment where traditional law and order were breaking down. Local authorities were often overwhelmed, and the central government's authority was increasingly questioned. It was in this context of institutional instability that a serial killer could operate with relative impunity for years. Beginning in 1902, a disturbing pattern emerged in Marrakesh. 10 women were reported missing that year, with no traces ever found. Initially, authorities assumed that these women had been kidnapped by traveling traders, a common enough occurrence in a major trading hub. The cases were never solved, and the disappearances were treated as isolated incidents rather than part of a coordinated pattern. Over the following 4 years, the disappearances continued at an alarming rate. By 1906, an additional 30 women had vanished without explanation, bringing the total number of missing persons to at least 40. What made these disappearances particularly troubling was their methodical nature. Young women would simply vanish from the streets of Marrakesh, leaving behind worried families and no clues for authorities to follow. The spring of 1906 marked an acceleration in the crisis. In mid-April alone, 10 young women were reported missing in just 2 weeks. Despite extensive searches conducted by both families and local authorities, no trace of any of the women could be found. The number continued to climb, first to 20, then 30, and finally 36 missing women in a matter of weeks. Mesfewi's descent into criminal infamy began subtly, hidden behind his legitimate business operations, working alongside a 70-year-old accomplice named Anna, sometimes referred to as Anna Rahali. In historical records, Mesfewi exploited his position as a trusted community figure under the guise of helping young women write letters, a valuable service in a time when literacy was not universal. The pair orchestrated a series of chilling murders. The discovery of Mesfewi's horrific crimes came to light, only when the concerned parents of a missing girl, the 36th victim to disappear in the terrible spring of 1906, traced her last known steps to his shop. This family's relentless determination to find their daughter would prove to be the key that unlocked one of the most horrific criminal cases in Moroccan history. The parents had methodically retraced their daughter's movements on the day she disappeared, interviewing witnesses and following every possible lead. Multiple sources confirmed that she had last been seen entering Mesfewi's shop to dictate a letter, a common service he provided to illiterate residents. When she failed to emerge or return home, suspicion began to focus on the seemingly respectable cobbler. The investigation quickly led authorities to Anna, Mesfewi's elderly accomplice. Under the brutal interrogation methods of the time, which included torture, Anna eventually broke down and confessed to the horrific scheme. She revealed that young women who came to Mesfewi's shop to dictate letters were offered drugged wine, which rendered them unconscious and helpless. According to Anna's confession, once the victims were incapacitated, Mesfewi would rob them of any money or valuables they possessed before decapitating them with a dagger. The methodical nature of these crimes, the use of drugs to subdue victims, the systematic theft of their belongings, and the consistent method of execution revealed a calculated and cold-blooded killer. Anna's detailed testimony led directly to Mesfewi's arrest. However, the elderly woman did not survive the harsh interrogation methods employed by authorities. The torture she endured proved fatal, and she died the same day she provided her confession, taking with her any additional details about the extent of their criminal partnership. When Moroccan authorities raided Mesfewi's properties, they uncovered a gruesome reality that shocked even experienced investigators. The discovery of the crime scenes revealed the true scope of the horror that had been unfolding beneath the cobblestones of Marrakesh for years. In a deep pit beneath Mesfewi's shop, investigators found the mutilated remains of 20 women. The bodies showed signs of violent death, having been decapitated with what appeared to be a sharp blade, likely the same dagger that was Mesfewi's tool of trade as a cobbler. The condition of the remains suggested that the murders had been taking place over an extended period. The horror did not end with the discovery beneath the shop. An additional 16 bodies were unearthed in the garden outside another property owned by Mesfewi, bringing the total number of confirmed victims to 36. The systematic burial of these victims in multiple locations demonstrated a level of premeditation and organization that was deeply disturbing to investigators. The discovery of these mass graves sent shockwaves through Marrakesh and beyond. The realization that a trusted member of the community had been systematically murdering young women for years challenged fundamental assumptions about safety and trust in Moroccan society. The scale of the crimes was unprecedented in the region's recorded history. Captured and confronted with undeniable evidence of his monstrous actions, Mesfewi confessed to all 36 killings. Unlike his accomplice, who had died under torture, Mesfewi survived the initial interrogations and provided detailed accounts of his crimes. His confessions revealed not only the methods he used, but also the disturbing motives behind his actions. Mesfewi cited robbery as his primary motivation, claiming that the murders were committed for the small amounts of money and valuables his victims possessed. This explanation was particularly chilling because many of his victims were killed for what contemporary accounts describe as paltry sums, revealing the insignificant value he placed on human life compared to minimal financial gain. The systematic nature of Mesfewi's crimes suggested motivations beyond simple robbery. The consistent method of operation, luring victims with legitimate services, drugging them, stealing from them, and then killing them, indicated a level of psychological satisfaction derived from the acts themselves. The fact that he continued killing, even when the risks were increasing, suggested that financial gain was not his only motivation. What made Mesfewi's case particularly disturbing was how he had used his legitimate business and respected position in the community as a cover for his crimes. His reputation as a helpful public letter writer had provided him with a constant stream of potential victims who trusted him implicitly. The trial of Hajj Mohammed Misfewi became a sensation that gripped not only Morocco, but also caught the attention of the international community. The sheer scale of his crimes and the methodical way they had been carried out made this one of the most significant criminal cases in Moroccan legal history. Initially, Misfewi was sentenced to death by crucifixion, a form of execution reserved for the most heinous crimes under traditional Moroccan law. The sentence was scheduled to be carried out on May 2, 1906, in a public display that would serve as both punishment and deterrent to others who might contemplate similar crimes. However, the crucifixion sentence sparked immediate controversy among the international community. Foreign diplomats residing in Morocco, representing European powers that were increasingly influential in Moroccan affairs, considered crucifixion a cruel and inhumane punishment inappropriate for the 20th century. Their protests led to a change in the execution method, though the alternative would prove to be equally brutal. Rather than proceed with the original crucifixion sentence, Moroccan authorities decided on a different approach that would prolong Misfewi's suffering. The new sentence called for an extended period of public torture, followed by immurement, being walled up alive. This decision bore the Sultan's own signature, indicating the highest level of approval for the brutal punishment. Beginning on May 15, 1906, Misfewi was subjected to daily public torture in the Marrakesh marketplace. He was stripped to the waist and whipped with switches of thorny acacia, while two assistants held him in place. The torture sessions became a form of public entertainment, with crowds gathering daily to witness his suffering. The authorities were careful to ensure that Misfewi survived as long as possible. After each whipping session, vinegar and oil were applied to his wounds to prevent infection and extend his suffering. The number of lashes was deliberately limited because, as contemporary accounts noted, Misfewi was an old man, and the people of Marrakesh had no idea of letting him die too early. These daily torture sessions continued for nearly a month, drawing crowds of spectators who came to see the notorious killer suffer. The public nature of the punishment served multiple purposes. It satisfied the community's desire for vengeance, demonstrated the consequences of such heinous crimes, and provided a form of closure for the families of the victims. On Monday, June 11, 1906, Misfewi was brought to the Great Square of Marrakesh for his final execution. Thousands of people had gathered to witness this culminating event, as word had spread that a death by immurement, being walled up alive, had not been seen in Marrakesh for many years. The anticipation was such that people brought provisions and the caravansaries were crowded with observers. Misfewi himself had no idea that this would be his final day. Having endured weeks of daily whipping, he expected another routine torture session. However, when he saw the crowds and the prepared wall structure, he realized the horrific fate that awaited him. Contemporary accounts describe how he had taken his whippings with fatalistic fortitude, hoping he might die under the thorns. But when he was dragged toward the upright tomb, he struggled with his jailers and screamed for mercy. The execution site had been carefully prepared. Masons had created a hole in the thick walls of the bazaar, approximately 2 feet deep and wide, and about 6 feet high. Chains were fixed to the back wall to prevent any escape attempt and to keep Misfewi standing throughout his ordeal. This claustrophobic space would become his tomb. As Misfewi was forced into the narrow cell, the crowd's reaction was savage. Bystanders pelted him with filth and offal from the marketplace, while he screamed for mercy. Before the wall was completely sealed, the chief jailer provided him with some bread and water, a final grimly ironic gesture of mercy before his entombment. The Masons then began the methodical process of bricking up the opening, course by course, until Misfewi disappeared from view. The crowd watched in eerie silence as the wall gradually enclosed the condemned man, transforming the opening into his tomb. Once the final bricks were in place, an unsettling quiet fell over the gathering as they waited to hear evidence of the condemned man's suffering. The crowd's wait was not long. Soon, Misfewi's terrified screams echoed from within the stone walls, and the gathered thousands erupted in cheers. Every scream from within the wall was met with roars of approval from the crowd, creating a chilling spectacle of collective vengeance. For 2 full days, June 11th and 12th, Misfewi's cries for mercy could be heard from within his stone prison. The crowds returned repeatedly to listen to his suffering, treating his agony as a form of entertainment. Night came and still Mesfewi screamed, and the crowds yelled in response, creating a macabre symphony of human cruelty. On the third day, June 13, 1906, silence finally fell over the marketplace. Haj Mohammed Mesfewi, the Marrakesh arch-killer, had died within his stone tomb. His death marked the end of one of Morocco's most notorious criminal careers, but it also highlighted the brutal nature of justice in early 20th century Morocco. The case of Mohammed Mesfewi sent shockwaves far beyond the borders of Morocco. International newspapers reported extensively on both the gruesome crimes and the equally shocking punishment, sparking debates about justice, morality, and the limits of human cruelty. The story was covered in publications from the United States to Europe, with many expressing horror at both the serial killings and the medieval execution method. A drawing of Mesfewi's execution was published in the St. John's Sun on September 8, 1906, bringing the horrific spectacle to international attention. This illustration showing the immurement process became one of the most widely circulated images associated with the case and helped to cement its place in criminal history. The international coverage highlighted the tension between traditional Moroccan justice and Western concepts of human rights and punishment. The method of execution, walling up alive, was an ancient practice that had largely fallen out of use in most parts of the world by the 20th century. Its revival in the Mesfewi case was seen as particularly barbaric by many international observers, even those who supported capital punishment. This case occurred during a period when European powers were increasingly asserting their influence over Moroccan affairs. The fact that foreign diplomats had successfully intervened to prevent the original crucifixion sentence, only to see it replaced with an equally brutal alternative, underscored the complex dynamics of colonial interference and traditional sovereignty. The Mesfewi case must be understood within the broader context of Morocco's political and social situation in 1906. The country was experiencing unprecedented foreign pressure and internal instability. The Treaty of Algeciras, signed just months before Mesfewi's execution, had effectively placed Morocco under international supervision, severely limiting the Sultan's sovereignty. Sultan Abdelaziz's authority was already severely compromised by his financial dependence on European creditors and his perceived subservience to foreign interests. The Mesfewi case provided an opportunity for the Moroccan authorities to demonstrate their continued control over internal justice matters, even as their political independence was being eroded. The brutal nature of the punishment also reflected deep-seated cultural attitudes toward crime and justice in traditional Moroccan society. Public executions and prolonged torture were not uncommon for serious crimes, and the community's enthusiastic participation in Mesfewi's suffering demonstrated the extent to which his crimes had traumatized the local population. The case also highlighted the vulnerability of women in early 20th century Moroccan society. Mesfewi's victims were predominantly young women from modest backgrounds who had trusted him to provide a basic service: letter writing. Their vulnerability to exploitation and violence reflected broader social and economic inequalities that made certain populations particularly susceptible to predators. The immurement execution method used against Mesfewi was considered one of the most brutal forms of capital punishment, even by the standards of the early 20th century. Historical records suggest that this may have been one of the last documented cases of immurement as a form of execution, marking the end of an ancient and barbaric practice. The psychological impact of witnessing such prolonged suffering was profound for the community. While the execution provided a sense of justice and closure for the victims' families, it also demonstrated the capacity for collective cruelty when a society feels threatened or betrayed by one of its own members. From a criminological perspective, the Mesfewi case represents an early example of a serial killer who used his legitimate business and social position as a cover for his crimes. His method of operation, gaining victims' trust through legitimate services before exploiting their vulnerability, would be recognized by modern criminologists as a classic predator pattern. The case also highlighted the challenges faced by law enforcement in investigating serial crimes in pre-modern societies. The lack of communication between different jurisdictions, the absence of forensic science, and the limited understanding of criminal psychology all contributed to Mesfewi's ability to operate undetected for years. The Mesfewi murders had a lasting impact on Marrakesh society. The knowledge that a trusted community member had been systematically killing young women for years fundamentally changed how people viewed trust and safety in their daily lives. The case created a lasting wariness about strangers and even familiar figures in positions of authority. The discovery that 36 women had been murdered over several years also highlighted the inadequacy of the missing person investigations conducted by local authorities. The fact that so many disappearances had been dismissed as isolated incidents revealed serious flaws in the law enforcement systems of the time. For the families of the victims, the case provided some measure of closure through the identification and punishment of their loved one's killer. However, it also opened wounds that would never fully heal as they grappled with the knowledge that their daughters and sisters had suffered such terrible fates. The public nature of Mesfewi's torture and execution served as a form of collective catharsis for the community, allowing them to express their rage and grief through participation in his punishment. However, this collective violence also demonstrated the thin line between justice and revenge in traditional societies. From a modern psychological perspective, Mesfewi's crimes exhibit several characteristics common to serial killers: the systematic targeting of vulnerable victims, the use of a position of trust to access victims, and the methodical disposal of bodies. His combination of financial and potentially psychological motivations fits patterns recognized by contemporary criminal psychologists. The extended period over which the crimes occurred, from 1902 to 1906, suggests that Mesfewi experienced little guilt or remorse for his actions. His ability to continue his normal business and social relationships while systematically murdering women indicates a level of compartmentalization typical of psychopathic personalities. The case also demonstrates how social and economic conditions can create opportunities for predators to exploit vulnerable populations. The large number of illiterate women who needed letter-writing services provided Mesfewi with a steady stream of potential victims who had legitimate reasons to trust him. Modern forensic techniques would have likely led to Mesfewi's capture much earlier. DNA evidence, fingerprinting, and systematic investigation methods would have connected the crimes and identified the perpetrator before he could claim so many victims. While history remembers Haj Mohammed Mesfewi for his crimes and brutal execution, it is important to remember that his true legacy lies in the 36 lives he took. These were young women with hopes, dreams, and families who loved them. They were daughters, sisters, and friends whose lives were cut short by a predator who exploited their trust. Many of the victims remain nameless in historical records, reflecting the limited documentation of individual lives in early 20th century Morocco, particularly those of women from modest backgrounds. Their anonymity in death compounds the tragedy of their loss and serves as a reminder of how social status can affect even how victims are remembered. The families who lost loved ones to Mesfewi's violence demonstrated remarkable courage in pursuing answers about their daughters' disappearances. It was the determination of one family to trace their daughter's last known movements that ultimately led to the breakthrough in the case. The case serves as a reminder of the importance of taking missing person cases seriously, regardless of the social status of the victims. The initial dismissal of the disappearances as isolated incidents allowed Mesfewi to continue killing for years after his first crimes. Today, the story of the Marrakesh murders serves as a grim reminder of the depths of human depravity and the enduring spirit of a community that, despite such darkness, continues to thrive and remember. The narrow streets of the Medina where Mesfewi once operated his shop now bustle with life, commerce, and the daily rhythms of a city that has survived centuries of history. The case of Haj Mohammed Mesfewi stands as one of the darkest chapters in Moroccan criminal history, but it also demonstrates the power of persistence in the pursuit of justice. It was the determination of grieving parents to find answers about their missing daughter that ultimately brought down a killer who had operated with impunity for years. As we explore the Marrakesh murders unveiling Haj Mohammed Mesfewi, We pay homage to the victims whose lives were tragically cut short and reflect on the lessons that history so painfully teaches us. The case reminds us that evil can hide behind the most mundane facades, and that vigilance and community solidarity are essential protections against those who would prey upon the vulnerable. The brutal execution of Mesfewi, while shocking by modern standards, reflected the rage and grief of a community that had been betrayed by one of its own. It also marked the end of an era in Moroccan justice, as traditional methods of punishment would increasingly give way to more modern judicial practices under the influence of European colonial powers. In uncovering the dark tale of the Marrakesh arch-killer, we are reminded of the complexities of human nature and the capacity for both great evil and resilient goodness. The story serves as a testament to the importance of protecting the vulnerable, the value of persistent investigation in the pursuit of truth, and the enduring strength of communities that refuse to let darkness define them. Beneath the scent of spices and the hum of the souks, Haj Mohammed Mesfewi lured trust into the shadows of a city known for its warmth and wonder. 36 young women, many still unnamed, vanished behind a cobbler's smile and the promise of a pen. Their stories were buried in garden soil and cellar stone, silenced by a man who weaponized tradition and trust. If this story unsettled you, informed you, or made you remember the names history forgot, please like, share, and subscribe to Weird World Wonders. We uncover the hidden horrors that history tried to bury, not to glorify evil, but to honor the voices it stole. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay compassionate, and never forget, some of the darkest secrets wear the face of the familiar.